he single-handedly expanded the Krishna consciousness movement by the give and take policy. And there is giving and taking everywhere we look in the world, but most of it is practically meaningless. Either that or it causes bondage, because the reason people are giving and taking is motivated by base desires. So I like to think of Prabhupada's giving and taking in other terms. There's extreme giving. First, about extreme giving. The word sampradaya actually means a bequeathment. It means to give the greatest gift, the most complete gift, sampradaya. To pass on that which is the most valuable. And this is the preoccupation of all elevated souls, because they're free from envy. And they want all others to rise. They want all others to get the best out of life. Nirmat saranam. They're free from envy. And therefore they have this capacity to give. Unlimited capacity to give, therefore it becomes extreme giving. And considering that, the sages, for instance, met at Naimasaranya for a 1,000-year sacrifice. The topic was how to give the greatest gift to the people in general. That's a good subject matter. How to do the greatest good to the most amount of people. Really do good for them. No profit motive whatsoever. Simply how to do good for the people. Or all living entities. And in that we see that there's not always an audience to take. It's not that if you have the best thing that people automatically take it. Because people require some capacity to take also. Even if you have the highest philosophy or something that will cure people from old age, birth and death and disease, if you go door to door and offer to them, they'll say, no thank you, I'm fine. I know everything. They'll say, I already know everything. I already have everything, I'm already fine. In fact, we look throughout history, even in the Christian movements, there were times at which people went around with their philosophy and said, you take it or die. So it takes some finesse or some shakti. As it's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tava Pravartan. One must have this empowerment to give and to be able to convince people to take. And we can see that, as we read earlier, Srila Prabhupada was praying for that power when he was on the Jaladuta. He was saying, please give me the power to give this. And please give me the power to convince them that it's the best thing for them. This is the mindset of the extreme giver that Srila Prabhupada is. And also, the supreme givers go out of their way, as Srila Prabhupada did, to create an infrastructure through which people could be systematically trained to take. Because even as a neophyte devotee, one may be able to take only a small amount of Krishna consciousness. As Keshavarti Maharaj mentioned, birds fly in the sky as high as they're able. What is their capacity? And in the Srimad Bhagavatam Adi Lila, in the 4th chapter, 34th verse, Srila Prabhupada mentions about how every living being has an appreciating capacity. They have a certain capacity to appreciate what's being given to them by God in any given time. And the lower species have very little capacity, whereas the human beings have a much greater potential. And the extreme givers, the acharyas, build an infrastructure through which people can gradually increase that appreciating capacity, so they can take what the extreme giver is offering. And that's what Srila Prabhupada did in starting an institution called ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It was his plan all along. And then comes the soft institution. We have the so-called hard institution, which is altogether necessary, although cumbersome, to say the least. It takes a lot of work and a lot of constantly tweaking, and Bir Krishna Maharaj is shaking his head, yes, because he and many others here, as Goshti and Nandis, have sacrificed their peace of mind through many decades to try to patch holes in that infrastructure, but it's altogether necessary. As Madhavananda Prabhu from Jagannath Puri likes to say, God always supports organized religion because it's necessary even though it's a real pain. But then comes the soft institution, which Keshav Bharati Maharaj was about to mention, and an article called Institutionalizing Prema by Joseph T. O'Connell, who is the preeminent scholar of Gaudiya Vaishnavism in the world, in the academy, and who was very favorable to Krishna consciousness. In fact, he wrote an extraordinary foreword to the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, very much appreciating Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu and his associates for the work they had done, unprecedented work. In his article, mentions that Gaudiya Vaishnavism is spread through the soft institution most proficiently. First of all, what is the soft institution and what is it that is spread? He said the institution, or the institution in general, is meant to carry culture across time and geography. It must be transported from one set of people in their tribes to other people around the world, and it must persist over time. It must last. It must be available to people over many, many years in order to be effective, for the transfer to be complete. So he says culture means that which is real, right, and valuable within that particular community. That's what his definition of culture is. How is it spread? He said in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's spread through the soft institution, which is the Gaudiya literature, the books. The books carry that culture across time, obviously, and we can hear many, many stories about people. In fact, some of them, I suspect, book distributors sell a book to somebody, the person takes it home, puts it on the shelf, the book distributor dies, takes birth in the same family, and then gets the book. These things have happened, I'm sure. And many other combinations and permutations of ways in which Krishna connects us up. But over time, this takes place by Krishna's arrangement. How? Through the soft institution, through the books. And from person to person, across time and geography, it is carried. Astoundingly, one small book can topple an empire. That's why despots hate books, practically. They rather wish there were no books, because they have to edit them all down and take out anything that seems subversive. And that's true. We went to Vietnam a few years ago with the BBT to get the Bhagavad Gita in Vietnamese, and lengthy process one has to go through for them to approve. Yes, approve the books so that it can go out to people. And despots are famous for burning books. But consider the fact, I met a Muslim mullah one day when I was in the Bay Area in California, and I said, Salam alaikum, alaikum salam, marhaba, kife laka, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. And he said, you pray to God? And I said, 16 times a day. And he came over and he gave me a big hug. I have a picture with him. And he took a book in Farsi, and that book went back to Afghanistan, and it's sitting there somewhere, drilling a hole, that one book. One small book, very dangerous, because it carries the culture across time and geography. It penetrates. Devamrita Swami had done many experiments in his early days, smuggling books at the risk of his own life into the former Soviet Union and other devotees, dropping books off of bridges onto barges that just happened to be going into the country, putting them in the engine blocks of cars. So this is the principle by which Srila Prabhupada lived, this extreme giving. But there's another point too, and it's extreme taking. That's the other side, as Prabhupada meant, is the give and take. And so what is the take? People take all the time. In fact, the material world is famous for exploitation. One living being is food for another. Jiva jiva sajivanam. Either psychologically or physically. And for the pure devotee, she takes, on behalf of Krishna. Anasaktasya vishayan yataham upayunjita. And sometimes people consider that a sadhu should live quiet, secluded life, take out a little begging bowl, and take a few rotis door to door. And that's certainly traditional. However, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada increased the size of that bowl. And they made it so large, Srila Prabhupada made it so large by the time he brought it across the ocean, that it could contain the whole universe. You just put it in here, not a few rotis, but put everything in. And we can accommodate, we'll take whatever you have and we'll use it in Krishna's service. And that's for the great benefit of people over the world. We read a verse recently as we were going through the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that when one does Madhukari, goes door to door to beg rotis, one should not consider, this house I know will give me because I've heard. You have to go randomly to 7 houses and take whatever they give you. And then that's it for the day. No consideration of, no pre-calculation. So when Prabhupada did his Madhukari, he came to America with no calculation. He had no idea what he was going to get in his begging bowl. He simply came here on the principle of taking for Krishna. Extreme taking, just as Vamandev was the example of extreme taking. Not considering who's a fit or unfit candidate. And that brings me to my last point, and that is, as representatives, those who are blessed to carry on this mood that Prabhupada and the principle of give and take for Krishna. What moral right do we have to ask from other people? On behalf of our spiritual parampara, we have the right to give to those who have some appreciating capacity. We also have the right to take. And I found this dilemma when I was in Jagannath Puri earlier this year. A group of devotees, we were in front of the Jagannath Mandir and we were doing Harinam Sankirtan and distributing books and prasadam. And then, as I was in the crowd distributing books, a beggar came up to me, professional beggar, and she asked me for a donation. And so I gave her a book. But I wasn't satisfied. I said, now you give something. And do you have the right, who has the right, I should say, to beg from a beggar? Do we have the right to beg from a beggar? And the answer is yes. We have the moral right. It is ethical. Because we are begging on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what ensued was a competition between the two of us. Professional beggar against another professional beggar. And I said, you give. And she said, no, I can't give. And I said, no, give. You have money, you give. And a crowd came around us to see what would happen. And so back and forth. But I was resolute. Absolutely resolute, because I knew that this was begging on behalf of Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara and every right in the world, and she felt it. And then she gave a donation, and the crowd went wild and went, Haribol! So Srila Prabhupada brought this spirit, as he said, I started this movement on the give and take principle. And this is our legacy. To be extreme givers. Give away everything to everyone for their upliftment in Krishna consciousness, and you'll never want for anything. Ananyas chintayam tamam yejana paripasate teshan nityat yuktanam yogakshema bahamyaham. This is what it means to absorb the consciousness 24 hours a day in extreme giving to every living being everywhere in all directions. That's what Samyak Kirtan means. And on behalf of the Supreme Personality of God and His representative, to take the offerings of people and deliver them to the Supreme Personality of God. And we thank Srila Prabhupada for bringing us this principle all the way from the spiritual world, originated by Krishna. And we thank everyone for coming here to Govardhana Hill today to celebrate this divine occurrence in 2016 of the Disappearance Day of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This yajna is almost complete. We have a Pushpanjali ceremony followed by an artik, and it can never be taken back. The yajna is done. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Well, every year I participate in this ceremony at different parts, and I must admit that this is the most profound and the most enlivening Prabhupada's disappearance, this celebration that I have. Thank you so much, Keshwabharati Maharaj, and thank you so much, Vaisheshika Prabhu, and thanks to all the wonderful devotees. And actually this gave me a very profound realization that how important it is that we God brothers get together and share our realizations, share our gratitude towards Srila Prabhupada in remembrance of Srila Prabhupada's wonderful contribution to this world. Thank you very much. All glory.
Vaisheshika Prabhu and Asi Krishna Prabhu, soon to be a Maharaj. Yeah. Cooperating. Anybody wants to come in Mayapur, he'll accept sannyas. We thank Bhakti Chur Maharaj. And, for bringing all your followers here and for coming here and for giving such wonderful katha about Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, which was the essence of the whole thing. And we beg you to come back. We're the beggars. We're the beggars. Extreme begging. Extreme taking.
I was already thinking that next year I'm going to come back again.